Coming up on this episode of Belief Hole.
For the last 50 years, the quaint coastal village of Montauk has been haunted by a dark legend. Whispers carry through the town of secret military projects, bizarre creatures, portals to other times, and still stranger things. On this episode of Belief Hole, join us as we explore government mind control and psychic experiments, hidden underground facilities and time travel technology, and endeavor to unravel fact from fiction within the extreme and controversial claims of the Montauk Project.
Conspiracy,
synchronicity,
Sasquatch,
homunculus,
alien races,
Satanism in Hollywood,
MKUltra,
Tartaria.
There's like a whole. I've been watching this one guy.
Close the door, Ed.
Jeremy, close your door!
What's the
Inner Earth disagreements.
Ghost Dad.
I like that movie.
Dogman,
Bohemian Grove.
Feldman.
Magicians are demons.
Specters and
Spirit
spooks.
summonings.
Sleep paralysis. Strange disappearances.
Sky whale phenomenon.
Alternative history.
Shadow people.
Shh, quiet. I'm trying to say words with the mouth.
It's getting dicey out there. Poltergeists.
That's cool.
Anunnaki. What is the moon?
Elf Towers. I would never talk about it. That's old. Y2K.
Cover-ups.
Apocalyptic
Catastrophe. Vampire.
Well, hello.
Well, hello.
Hello there. I'm John.
I'm Jeremy.
And I'm Chris.
Yes, you are.
And you are.
And there you are.
And here we are.
And you are listening to the Belief Hole podcast.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Today we have an extraordinary adventure for you.
It's gonna be epic.
Yeah.
It is. Oh, we're going to untangle a web of strangeness.
I've never crammed so hard in my life for anything.
No, the last 4 days have just been sitting in the dark, reading this weird, bizarre book.
Hey, the fame and the money's worth it, right,
That's
guys?
true. I did have a dream that we were successful last night. And we were also private eye detectives running through the streets of Miami,
It's a prophecy.
chased by robots, but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah, what are we doing today, Jer?
Oh, you're asking me? Okay, well, this, ladies and
Did you
gentlemen.
guys tag team this one?
Oh, man. Yeah. Yeah, it hasn't been since I think season 1 or halfway through 2 where we really worked hard on the same episode because of the expansion. You know, we usually
separate a topic for, yeah.
This one, I started reading the book, and the book isn't super long. It's like 200 pages. The book is called The Montauk Project Experiments in Time.
By Preston Nichols.
Yes, and it's less than 200 pages. But once you start reading it, you need a roadmap.
You have to untangle it because it deals with parallel timelines weaving in characters coming through time, jumping back through time. And it's not written very clearly. The guy, Preston Nichols, who we're going to be talking about, it's interesting too because he is definitely eccentric. When I first read some of the book and I'd seen bits of him, I thought this guy is a huckster. Like he's just making this stuff up. But then I actually sat down and watched him talk for like an hour. And I realized this guy's very smart and he believes what he's saying. He may be delusional, but I think he's an authentic person, even if he's crazy. But he's smart enough to make a lot of this make sense.
Part of the reason we're doing this is because of Stranger Things.
Right.
It's based loosely on the events that happened, supposedly.
Yeah, there are so many parallels. I mean,
yeah, and it's the perfect time because the series finale dropped this week.
Yeah, and it's been such an epic show that's been kind of a conglomeration of a lot of different supernatural paranormal phenomena that we've covered on the show.
And also just the nostalgia of it. It relates so well to us because we grew up,
around that time.
Well, we were born in the 80s.
Right,
So.
missing the payphones, using maps and not knowing everything at the drop of a hat.
Also, it's a story we've been wanting to do for years. We had a friend who gave us the book that we're using for the episode today, and we thought now would be the perfect time.
Absolutely. And she will remain anonymous in case we get to some of her personal anecdotes about the location, her spending time out here on Long Island near Montauk. But anyways, as far as the show goes, Stranger Things was originally supposedly called Montauk.
Yeah.
Right?
So none of this is proven then? This is all like just hearsay?
Okay, so this is the interesting thing. I was going to say this. So yes, nothing is completely validated outside of Preston Nichols and his circles of compatriots who have allegedly experienced the testing, like the Montauk Boys. We'll get into that towards the end of the episode.
The Montauk Boys would be like a parallel to the character L in Stranger Things.
Yes. You asked about, is anything confirmed?
Yeah, right.
So there is a lot of circumstantial evidence that we're going to go through. There's been more recent discoveries that point to there's absolutely more going on at this old defunct base than what is official record.
Okay. So this isn't like a unclassified government project.
No. They're completely denied.
But
Okay.
but it's connected to and touches on verified government projects like MKUltra,
Yes.
Right.
other brainwashing type
Project
programs.
Rainbow, although it's different in this story,
Right, which was the precursor or the project that the Philadelphia experiment happened in.
which is
Allegedly.
another hotly contested conspiracy theory.
So there's a lot of things to unravel.
Yeah, the reason why the story is so large and even in under 200 pages, you have to do so much ancillary research because,
Ooh, good word.
you like that one? That's a good one. Because he throws in Nikola Tesla, Albert Einstein,
John von Neumann.
You've got time travel. You got portals opening to Mars. We might get to that. If not, it'll be in the expansion. But so much stuff. And yes, as Jeremy mentioned, it's like, I don't know if you've seen the show Dark, that awesome German science fiction show.
I saw the first half of it.
Okay, so the time travel in that is very complex, but this book is almost more complex because
Convoluted, really.
you realize that the narrative, it moves in different directions. So it was really a mind-boggling book to get through. So we unraveled it as much as we could and studied other sources, and now we have a story to tell.
Yeah.
Here's another question.
Yes.
So, did you read anything about what other people thought about the book?
Oh, yeah.
Yes. It's very divided.
Yeah, it was.
Most people,
Most people think it's fabrication.
most quote serious people think it's complete nonsense.
What's a serious person like Neil deGrasse Tyson?
I feel like everyone knows a serious person. People who think of themselves as serious people. And it is fair for sure. This book is
It seems like it
super
might
out
be
there.
kind of easy to dismiss out of hand.
yeah, absolutely. What makes it
But those
believable.
are the juicy ones.
Exactly. And what adds to that juice is that there is the context. This takes place in Montauk, which has a history, a military history. It has the technology there with this radar tower called the Sage Radar Tower, which we'll get into. It has the equipment. It's right down the street from Brookhaven Institute, where they've done testing that makes sense, where a lot of this original technology, stealth technology, which the Philadelphia experiment was allegedly an experiment to test this stealth technology, all this stuff is happening in this area. So the context makes sense. And then with the allegations of conspiracy, of mind control experiments, abducting people, derelicts and children, all this stuff has been proven and is on the record with other government projects like MKUltra or the Holmesburg experiment, right, Chris? Is that what it's
Right.
called?
Horrifying Holmesburg experiments where they tested on prisoners. They wanted to create a Manchurian candidate. This is a disclosed project that the chemical branch of the army was doing. And they were also testing the most carcinogenic aspect to Agent Orange on the skin of these prisoners without their permission.
So we'll get into a lot of those different.
Yeah, but just to say, this is not a new thing for the U.S. government. Confirmed things have happened.
And it's believable because of the
The
context.
government usually tells us most of the things that happen behind closed doors.
Mostly, yeah. And they've told us everything now.
Yes.
Now we know that
I
everything's
mean,
out
we
there.
don't have any good reason not to trust everything they say.
No, they told us that they told us everything. So
Yeah. I guess we should stop the recording.
But there is definitely stuff in this material and other lectures that Preston Nichols has given where you're like, what? There's so much extreme out there stuff.
he's an eccentric and a
Ooh.
rambler.
Sounds like a good topic for our show.
Yep.
If it's out there.
In the expansion, guys, if you're not a member, sign up. We're going to get into some real crazy stuff. And you asked John about Elle and how she's portrayed in the book. Of course, she's not in the book. They're the Montauk boys, which are children that were abducted and used for these experiments, mind control,
Allegedly.
psychic abilities, very much like Elle and her compatriots in Stranger Things. But I did find an alleged account of a girl who believes she was abducted right around this time period. And her experience matches so much like Elle's. There's so many parallels. And I thought, like, did the Duffer brothers find her story?
Yeah.
And like, same thing, like floating in like this black viscous liquid, being attached to electrodes in an isolation tank used for these tests, but also reptilians involved. It gets
Ooh.
way crazier.
And that's all coming up in the expansion. But why don't you describe this place for us, this beautiful scenic area that is Montauk Point?
Okay, so to set the scene of Montauk, this is the context of Montauk, geographically, atmospherically.
Is that the real picture?
That's the radar tower, the Sage Radar Tower in Montauk.
Let's go there.
Right? You can. So this is what's cool too, is it's now Camp Hero State Park.
Camp Hero. That's hilarious.
Isn't that crazy? Named after a military officer. I can't remember his name.
Who died during World War II.
Andrew
Was he
Hero.
a hero? His last name was Hero?
Yeah.
That's so awesome. I mean, how do you not become a soldier with the last name? Or like a firefighter or something?
This is a stupid thought, but I thought, is that where Hero comes from? I mean, I don't know.
What?
I don't know. I didn't live
on.
before the 40s. I don't know.
That's
do you guys know where it comes
dumbest
from?
thing I've ever heard you say.
This is the man who thinks mountains are old giants. So
My brain broke reading this book.
You need, put it back in.
I was going to say, working on it. The Camp Hero was interesting because we have to talk about Stranger Things, of course, but there was a scene in the 4th season. I won't spoil anything, but she writes a letter to her boyfriend who kind of sucked at this point, and she left him, and she said, "I'm going back to be your hero." And she essentially goes back to what is Montauk.
oh, that's hilarious.
So she went back to Camp Hero. I'm going back to
What
become a
season
hero.
was this?
This is the most recent season.
And if you haven't seen it, this won't spoil anything.
Remember she's in California, Elle?
She decides to return to Hawkins and
She
help
leaves that
the-
note. She's like, "I'm going back to be a hero again."
Oh, yeah.
I just thought that was funny because she literally, if you look at what this is based on, she goes
he
back
wa-
to Camp Hero.
Right.
That's crazy. I didn't put that together. Yeah.
The boyfriend was being kind of a baby at that point.
Yeah, he was, yeah.
But that's an interesting point.
We have complaints.
She's
about
going
the way-
back to Camp Hero, really.
Yes.
If you look at it from the Montauk perspective.
I just thought that was kind of interesting. But this is where this takes place. Jutting out from mainland New York into the choppy surf of the Atlantic Ocean is Long Island. And at the very east end of this long island is the picture.
I like how you couldn't find another adjective for island.
This long island is the picturesque village known as Montauk. Its land is rich with history, its sands rumored to be rich with lost pirate booty. And the ruins of the Montauk Air Force Base, now haunted by controversy, legend, and mystery, is where our story takes place. So, Montauk is at the very edge here, and in Montauk is the old Montauk Air Force Base, now decrepit, left abandoned. You're not allowed to go there, but you can go to Camp Hero State Park, which surrounds it.
So you can't go there?
You can't go into the military area that's...
What are they hiding?
Exactly. Well, that's what's weird too, is the level of security that's there.
Is there a lot of security?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess you could make the case, obviously, like,
It's a dangerous place,
Right.
old
Yeah.
equipment. There are signs that say, like, if you find an old mine, don't touch it. Let someone know.
a mine? Like a blow-up device?
Like a blow-up device.
dictionary
As it's
term.
technically defined as.
Why would they have mines there?
Well, it's from World War II.
So we'll talk about the base, like what this place was
Okay.
used for. But at the end of the episode, we'll weigh the evidence and we'll talk about the rationalizations for certain things, and we'll talk about, everything all together. And some things,
of truth.
the scales of truth. And we're going to talk about some things that point to that something went on potentially there. And as we said before, things have happened in the past. And just real quickly, I want to touch on 2 examples we mentioned briefly. MKUltra, right?
Yep.
It's in our intro. One thing we've never actually covered out loud on the show, but we've talked about many times.
Because we've been programmed not to.
Exactly.
It's such a dark topic, too.
It is.
And by the way, there are serious accusations about child abuse, abduction. So,
In this one?
yeah,
Yeah.
that's the foundation of this. So just to say, like, yeah, we joke around a lot on the show. We have a fun time, but obviously these things are serious topics.
And disclaimer for kids.
Yeah, we won't get too graphic.
I really enjoy the children being abducted.
John likes the darkness.
Just kidding.
It does make for a good tale.
Well, I mean, if you look at, like, Stranger Things would be kind of
Right.
boring if Elle never got
Look at every
kidnapped.
Stephen King story. There's
Yeah.
a child who's in danger.
There is a difference, though, obviously, from a movie and real life.
Right, exactly. That's what we're covering is alleged real events.
It's, it has the nice soft edges of a Nerf ball.
The Stranger Things in the show.
Yeah, but real life is different.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, speaking of real life, MKUltra, CIA program that began in 1953, was reduced in scope in 64 and 67 and was halted in 73. But it involved subjecting this is important too, unwitting and unwilling participants into behavioral programming, including the use of LSD and other chemicals, electroshocks, hypnosis, sensory deprivation, isolation, and verbal and sexual abuse, and torture. It was torture,
Right.
in addition to other forms of torture, brainwashing, which is also key to this story. And interestingly enough, as MKUltra shut down by Congress because of a leak, I believe.
No, it wasn't a leak. Sorry, it was a FOIA request. And then all this extra information came out about it.
So Congress is like, no, you can't do this. And the CIA is like, oh, sure, we'll stop, right? Because that's what they'll do. They won't just move it somewhere. But interestingly enough, by the way, MKUltra happened at like 80 different installations around the country, colleges, hospitals,
Yep, universities.
mental institutions.
80 universities alone, I think.
So they close it down, allegedly, right? Because Congress says, stop, please. So yeah, the shadowy CIA is going to listen. Anyway, what starts in 1973? Montauk Project, allegedly.
So MKUltra gets shut down. Montauk Project allegedly begins, according to Preston.
Right.
Nichols.
So the question in the book, one of the things that's brought up is part of MKUltra, Phoenix Project, it's also known as an umbrella term, is MKUltra an aspect of it that has been funneled into what becomes not only mind alteration, which is the beginning of MKUltra, but turns into experiments in time travel, opening up portals through psychic ability,
Parallel realities.
using technology and a communication between the psychic mind and computer systems. So that's what we're getting into.
Yeah.
The other one I kind of mentioned already, but I just thought there was an interesting quote here from a terrible experiment that went on in Philadelphia.
The Holmesburg.
Yes. This is a quote from a man who wrote a book about it, Alan M. Hornblum.
He was a literacy director or something. He worked at the prison at the time, but couldn't say anything.
Acres of Skin. What?
Yeah, that was the name of the book.
That's a horrifying title.
It sounds like a Silent Hill sequel, doesn't it?
Maybe Hostel or something.
The descriptions where they were testing on the skin of these people.
Right.
Acres of Skin is disturbing.
Yeah.
So they would take Scotch tape and they would put it on the skin of these inmates and put it on, rip it off, put it on, rip it off until the top layer of skin was removed. And then they would drop highly carcinogenic chemical compounds right into the skin. So it would absorb quickly into the bloodstream. The effects of this would be terrible. People would taste metal in their mouth. They would pass out. They'd wake up. Their skin would be on fire. At one point, one of the doctors allegedly took it off of him, put it on the wall, and it ate the paint away from the wall. Crazy experiments, but this was another example.
People are wicked.
Yeah, and this is how this exactly ties into the accounts today with the mind manipulation. The quote from the author of this book who worked there: "The Army comes in here in 1963. They're looking for basically the Manchurian candidate. They're trying to come up with a chemical that can get an inmate to do certain things if they want. This was real. It happened here. Without a doubt, the U.S. Army Chemical Corps was performing mind control experiments in here from 1963 to approximately 71, 72. So just another example of this did happen. These things were going on. So, not everything can be thrown out of the basket of the story.
Think about that time period too. That was before technology was
so advanced.
Yeah, and they really were trying all sorts of weird stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
Like dolphin training and
that's a great story.
Psychic,
Timothy Leary and
astral travel,
psychic
any
testing.
way they could get an edge over these other countries.
Yeah, exactly.
The government, different agencies, I think the FBI, the CIA, were interested. It's on record. Actually, our friend Brad sent me this a while ago, but going back as far as the 50s and even earlier, they were looking at Bill Murray-style Ghostbusters testing of telepathy and psycho abilities.
Oh, right.
So they've been interested in this for a long time.
Well, look at Project Stargate. And that will tie into this only insofar as showing that there's another confirmed example of a government project that was testing psychic ability.
Right.
Because the big concern about Project Stargate, they were concerned about what the Soviets were doing because they knew that Soviets were spending or had spent at least $1 billion on psychotronic research and how they could weaponize psychic ability. When the US government heard about this, they're like, we need to do something. They started Project Stargate, which became like 8 different programs. At the end, they funneled back into this overarching Project Stargate.
Yeah.
I think it was Operation Stargate initially, but just an example of like the government was looking at this, all this stuff's real. How much of it is real in our story we'll be looking at and examining. But these things did happen, and that's the key here in this episode.
Let's begin the story.
Let's do it.
Where's the boyfriend?
Whose boyfriend?
Elle's boyfriend. Where does he come up?
He's in the...
It's going to be throughout the episode. Which character plays this role?
Warning. Brief Stranger Things tangent ahead.
He's the psychic that goes through time and turns into a 1-year-old baby.
Does he get really disappointed in 11 certain times?
Oh, that boyfriend. Oh, Elle's boyfriend. I was thinking of the kid who's like the douchebag at the beginning, and then in the first season, he's like
he's a good
awesome.
character. Baseball bat guy.
The video store guy?
Steve.
Yeah.
Steve, yeah.
Anyway,
I
good
didn't
show.
like him at the beginning, but he's definitely probably one of the better characters.
I should get this out of the way. Pretty great show. First season's awesome. Fourth season's great. Season 2, I think, not
Was
great.
that season 2?
Season 3 is not good either.
It's not. It gets a little better in season 3. This is all my opinion.
Was season 2 the one that they went to the city?
Yeah.
Oh, God. How do you go from season 1 to season 2?
Elle meets characters that she used to be in the experiment with, and their names are like Dozer and Bronco.
Rebel
and
punk superpower
It's like
people.
the Matrix 3.
They're like murderer assassins, and they're like all rough and tumble living in this warehouse, but everything is spotless. Their clothes are clean. They just went to Target.
It's not the
I
worst
mean,
when they're like in a bad situation and the hair is perfect.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
Jurassic Park.
Oh,
the
yes.
new one.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
There are parts I liked. Well, I just like seeing the old crew in there.
Chris,
know?
you did not like that movie though. We made fun of it the entire time.
No, I know we did. But I did love seeing, like, whenever
There were some cool scenes.
whenever
There was a
Malcolm and Sam Neill,
Laura Dern.
but whenever they were on their interplay, and when they were in the jungle and there were dinosaurs, but that didn't happen until like halfway through the movie.
I know. I'm just relating back to Stranger Things 2. It had a lot of that unnecessary, weird kind of, traveling all over the world, leaving locations, making confusing.
Yeah, my theory always with Stranger Things was that the Duffer Brothers didn't expect the popularity of season 1 to be so immense, and then they didn't really have anything ready to go. Season 2 felt like a quick grab for concept ideas, And they
But there's a
went their own
difference
direction.
between grabbing for concept ideas and then like, I don't know, it just had this, sometimes it feels like there's agendas coming from the outside, pushing it in certain
for sure. I
directions.
think there's a little
that
bit of
has
that.
nothing to do with being underprepared. That's
No, I
like
just- I was so-
maybe pressure from the
Right.
outside.
I was
to-
referring more to like the thin characters in the
Oh, right,
city.
right.
The names
You
were
know
like
what?
Dozer.
The cheesy thing about that, but also makes sense, is that in the 80s you did have these like action movies with Sylvester Stallone and other
Right.
guys where like a bad guy that is just very surface, or a girl, and they're like these characters that are, I'm trying to think of a specific reference, but where there's these superficial rebel punk characters with those stupid names. I mean, they were pulling from that. So I mean, nostalgia wise, like, and that's another thing they get slack for. Well, they copied this idea from Spielberg, or well, obviously these are all homages,
Yeah.
right? Like they're pulling from it, but without that,
That's the purpose of the show.
the whole thing is like a wondrous nostalgia, magical look at this basically regurgitated Montauk idea. But I think it has value in that.
Yeah.
People that say it, yeah.
Again, to say I really like. There are weak seasons. The first and last. This last season's been great so far. You guys might have finished it by the time this comes out. We'll be dropping it, I think, 3 days after the last 5 or 6 episodes or whatever airs. So maybe you're just finishing it now. But either way, let's get back to the actual story behind.
Hey guys,
Stranger
let us
Things.
know if you want us to stop the show and start a movie review channel instead. That'd be a lot of less work.
I'd love that
Yeah.
as a tier. That'd be so much fun.
That would be great.
Let us know.
Say, let's do it.
Okay, before we get into how Preston, our main character in the story, discovers what is allegedly happening at Montauk, I just want to tell you a quick background of what this base was built for, what it was doing there. So Camp Hero was originally Fort Hero. It was a coastal defense station that was disguised, I think this is really cool, as a fishing village. So they built it to look like a fishing village because during World War II, they were concerned about German U-boats. They were worried about invasions from the sea into New York. So this was like the last stand idea. So they built these huge gun batteries. We'll talk a little bit about them later because they play into what it might be under the base today, the conspiracy and the possible explanation.
But the disguise of the fishing village was very cool. And
Yeah.
the church in town was actually a gymnasium for the military personnel. So
cool.
everything was set up to look like just your average place because they didn't want to be a target.
Yeah.
Which is just a cool setup.
Where'd they go to church then?
It was personal prayer at home.
Outdoor chapel.
Personal prayer.
So it's the progression from this World War II facility. Then during the Cold War, it gets transferred to the Air Force and becomes Montauk Air Force Station, and it gets its notorious sage dish. This giant looming structure that's still there today, the last one of its kind that looms above Camp Hero. This is a super-powered Cold War era sage dish, and it was constructed so that in the event of a Soviet nuclear attack, it would give the U.S. 30 extra minutes of warning
time.
that you were about to all die and you'd have no escape.
Yeah. It's the last one of its kind, right?
It's basically built to let people know, like, hey, you're going to die. Do you want to know?
Do you want to also be a dick and shoot nukes back?
You can't really do anything about
Before
it.
we all die?
Just enough to cause mass panic.
Yes.
Yeah. But this is what's interesting about the tower too, is it makes sense that this project that Nichols talks about would happen there because of the technology used in the Montauk Project and the way he describes it as an electrical engineer. It sounds like all that equipment would be there, and he was able to take some of that equipment home at one point. You'll get into that. But it's just the perfect environment for the story to take place. So either very creative, backpedaling, seeing what happens at Montauk, and then saying, oh, this crazy story could happen here, or a delusion, or it actually happened.
Right. So basically, the end of the story of this base is it gets shut down after the Cold War. It becomes abandoned, derelict. On paper, by all official sources at the time, it was not in operation. Later, there'll be evidence presented through investigation by a senator that helps Preston and discovers that there was a lot of activity going on there. But for our purposes, when our character Preston Nichols comes upon the base for the first time, this place is derelict and shut down. At least he thinks so, or it's supposed to be. So let's get into how this conspiracy was allegedly unveiled initially through the eyes of this man, Preston Nichols, and his experience.
The author of the book.
Yes. So Preston Nichols, interesting guy. In 1971, he begins working for a place that he calls initially BJM. In the book, when the book was published in 1992, he's referring to it as BJM. And this is another thing about the book. There's a lot of people and places that are referred to with pseudonyms, which you find out later. And initially, people thought this is an example of how this is all fraud and made up. Later, you find out that these are real people, and here are their names. This is the senator that was involved.
Right.
BJM, you find out years later, is AIL. It's an airborne instruments laboratory that was actually based in the area. So
On Long Island.
Whether or not he worked there is still controversial because just like Bob Lazar, all of the records are gone if there were any.
Right.
Same with his degree in Tampa, gone if he went there.
Just like Bob Lazar.
Just like Bob Lazar. So again, has this happened before? Yes. Does it mean that he's telling the truth? Not necessarily, but let's continue. So he's working at AIL in 71. and it's a defense contractor in Long Island. And then he alleges that through the years, he received an electrical degree specializing in electromagnetic phenomena, which is key to this story and the projects and experiments that they do. And although he's not especially interested in the paranormal, he obtains a grant to study mental telepathy. And he's doing this to determine whether or not it exists at all.
And that's not unheard of. We had people from IBM were at home trying to talk to plants with their computers and telepaths.
Brilliant people have side projects that usually are or can often be more obscure and strange.
Exactly.
So he discovers something, allegedly, during this time over the years, experimenting and working for AIL. He discovers telepathic communication does, in fact, exist, and that it works a lot like radio waves, right? Which we've kind of talked about before. We've tinkered around with that idea, right? That the mind is a receiver. So this is kind of an interesting part that I was reading about. He said the principles of these, what he calls telepathic waves, acts in similar ways to radio waves, but not completely. And of course, there's not a lot of description in this. There might be in his lectures. And again, for the sake of the story, we're not going to go into super detail about how every machine worked and what parts they used.
Right. We started to do that, and then it was like 30 pages of notes.
Right. So we're going to stick with the story, but this is what he was claiming. Telepathic wave. And this is what he has to say about that.
I found this very exciting. I had discovered a whole brand new electromagnetic function that was not in any of the textbooks I'd ever seen. I wanted to learn as much as I could and studied all the activities that might use this type of function. My interest into metaphysics had been launched. I continued to research in my spare time and collaborated with different psychics to test and monitor their various responses. In 1974, I noticed a peculiar phenomenon that was common to all of the psychics that I worked with. Every day at the same hour, their minds would be jammed. They couldn't think effectively, suspecting that the interference was caused by an electronic signal. I used my radio equipment and correlated what came on over the airwaves at the times the psychics were non-functional. Whenever a 410 to 420 megahertz cycle appeared on the air, they were jammed. When the 410 to 420 megahertz cycle was off, the psychics would open back up after about 20 minutes. It was obvious that this signal was greatly impeding the ability of the psychics.
Okay, this is where he decides to take matters into his own hands and try to figure out what's going on here. This is where he begins to get led down the rabbit hole.
I decided to trace the signal, placing a modified TV antenna on the roof of my car. I grabbed a VHF receiver and set out looking for the source of it. I tracked it right to the Montauk Point. It was coming directly from a red and white radar antenna on the Air Force Base. At first, I thought this signal might have been generated accidentally. I checked around and found out that the base was still active. Unfortunately, security was tight, and the guards wouldn't give any useful information. They said that the radar was for a project run by the FAA. I couldn't press the point beyond that. In fact, their statement didn't make a lot of sense. This was a World War II radar defense system known as SAGE radar. It was totally antiquated, and there is not any known reason why the FAA would need such a system. I didn't believe them, but I couldn't help but be intrigued. Unfortunately, I had hit a dead end.
You just sound like Dan Aykroyd.
Yeah, I did have a little bit of a Canadian.
Yeah, I like
perfect.
I like it. So I love that visual, though, of he's working with these psychics. They're getting blocked. Because he's an electrical engineer, he's doing experimentation in his lab with these people, and he's realizing that the signal is being broadcast or something.
Slaps a radio antenna on his car.
Yeah, it's very Goonies. It's very like Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, where he puts this thing on his car, and he's driving around town trying to trace down the signal that's jamming them. I just thought that was kind of a cool
I feel like,
visual.
doesn't that happen in the new Ghostbusters movie, Afterlife? Something like that, where they're tracking something in the car, signal of a...
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Sounds familiar.
That sounds right. They go to the mine. Anyway.
They stole it from this book.
All right. Sign up for the later tier so you can listen to us talk about movies.
Future reports.
Where did that come from? Did you see that in the notes?
No.
I think he just was referring to our later tier.
Yeah, I just meant like
reports.
Future reports of movies reviews.
So great.
So he continues his psychical research, but he's not getting anywhere on the investigation of what's going on at Montauk until 1984. He gets tipped off by a friend that the base is abandoned.
It was indeed abandoned, with debris strewn everywhere. I saw a fire extinguisher left amidst many scattered papers. The gate was opened, as were the windows and doors of the buildings. This is not the way the military normally leaves a base.
Yeah, interesting. And this is true. I mean, you look at the video evidence that took place later when the park is derelict. There's documents strewn everywhere. It looks like something intense has happened in certain places. There's destroyed cable networks and...
Right. There's torch marks where it looks like they've been purposely destroyed, which actually takes place in his story later. It explains why that happens. But there's footage, John, we'll have this in the show notes, guys, of Preston Nichols leading people through in the 90s when this place is closed down, kind of sneaking in and filming all these, and it looks insane. And when he's pointing out different machines and stuff, it sounds like he obviously knows what he's talking about. It's like a 2-hour-long tour of the different facility things. So he's recalling what he's about to realize, that he actually worked there.
Yes, spoiler. So we don't know this yet, but it comes to his attention. We'll figure this out. There is some skullduggery going on. So he's in there, right? He finds a bunch of great equipment, high voltage gear, electronics. So he decides, I'm going to contact the Surplus Disposal Agency in Michigan to see if he can buy it, right? He talks to them. Neither the military nor the GSA claim to know anything about any of the equipment in there. They don't know who owns it. Eventually, he's referred to a caretaker there, Mr. Anderson, of the Montauk Air Force Base. And he shows Preston around and basically says, like, you're welcome to take anything you can this trip. But if I ever see you again, you know, I work here as the caretaker, technically, even though you have somewhat permission, I have to kick you out.
Right.
So you get this time to come. But then he also says, by the way, I go get drinks at 7 p.m. every night. So kind of like saying, like, if you want to come back, I don't really care.
Oh, right. Like a wink and a nod.
So over time, Preston is returning and grabbing things.
Collecting gear and electrical equipment.
Right. He also starts taking psychics there because his work has led him to believe that psychics get impressions of places and impressions of people. So he takes another trip to Montauk with a psychic assistant named Brian. They split up to explore. And this is what Preston has to say.
I went into a building and saw a man who appeared to be homeless. He told me that he had been living in the building ever since the base was abandoned. He also said that there had been a big experiment a year earlier and that everything had gone crazy. Apparently, he'd never gotten over it himself. In fact, the man recognized me, but I had no idea who he was or what he was talking about. I did listen to his story. He said he had been a technician at the base and that he'd been AWOL. He had deserted the project just before the base had been abandoned. He spoke about a big beast appearing and frightening everyone away. He told me about the technical details of the machinery and how things worked. He also said something that was very strange. He told me that he remembered me well. In fact, I had been his boss on the project. Of course, I thought this was pure nonsense. I didn't know then that there was any truth to his story. This was just the beginning of my discovery that the Montauk Project was real.
Yes.
Oh, and that's kind of important to note too, his discovery that it was real, because prior to this, allegedly in the area, even before he wrote his book, there were rumors of experiments going on at the base.
Mind control experiments. Around town, you'd hear things whispered from people.
Right.
Yeah, it's definitely very weird to say, like, he remembered him as his boss.
Oh, yes.
That would be, I mean,
super trippy.
That's definitely a hard one to swallow.
Exactly.
It gets, I mean, this is
the beginning.
This is the beginning of the insanity, of the really intense, sort of mind-boggling aspects to his story.
And just as a little preview that we'll get more into in the expansion, guys, if you're not signed up, is we'll get into some of these characters that are traveling through time. We haven't even talked about them, so I won't get into them yet, but it goes to like soul transference, shrinking people down, age regression to infant, and giving them to parents who'd lost a previous child.
Back in time.
Characters that are currently in the 80s actually were in the 40s and then taken back, and then so they could live another life with age regression. It gets really, really crazy.
This is why it took so long to even figure out what the narrative was here, what the structure was. But let's continue on. So he's in this facility, right? He's in the base here in Montauk, the derelict base. And after he has this conversation with the homeless man, he meets up with his friend Brian, the psychic guy, his assistant. And he's like, can you do a reading right now? What are you picking up? He said, he starts speaking about the same things that the man was speaking of. He's speaking of other things too, like irregular weather patterns, mind control, animals being affected, crashing through windows. Again, this vicious beast comes up. So Brian is now confirming this allegedly. Mind control was the focus though. Mind control was the focus of the reading. So they grabbed all the gear they could and they left.
Right.
This is where they leave for the first time. So of course this is going to pique Preston's interest. And he continues his investigation around town. He ends up camping on the beach there. He's talking to people in bars, on the beach, on the road, anywhere he can.
Trying to get the scoop, right?
Right. And he's puzzled because people he's running into in Montauk are recognizing him, which, confuses him. He gets reports of strange weather phenomena. As we mentioned, the psychic had kind of picked up on stories about animals coming into town in mass, sometimes crashing through windows. He ends up contacting the chief of police, who allegedly reports, short bursts of crime in town that would happen for like a short period of time and then nothing. He talked about how large groups of teens would gather for 2 hours and then just disperse. Maybe strange, I don't know.
We used to do that.
We used to do that. But anyways, the information kept coming in, but everything was still a mystery to Preston. And things start to become clear to him when a man named Duncan Cameran arrives at his home. And this is in November of 84. John, will you read this little bit here?
Hey, it's our birthday.
Oh, yeah.
Do you think you were alive when Duncan arrived?
Apparently.
Well, what day in November? What day in November
was that month, that year. By the way, our P.O. box is for a present for our birthday.
The 15th of November, 1984. These young little lads were born into this cruel, dark world.
That's true. That's what they said at the time. To announce our birth.
They said.
All right, ready?
Yes.
In November of 84, another man appeared at my lab door. His name was Duncan Cameran. He had a piece of audio equipment, and he wanted to know if I could help him with it. He quickly became absorbed in the group of psychics I had working with me at the time. This endeavor was a continuation of my original line of research. Duncan showed a keen aptitude for such work and was extremely enthusiastic. I thought he was too good to be true, and became suspicious of him. My assistant, Brian, felt the same way. He didn't like Duncan's sudden involvement, and decided to go his own way. At one point, I surprised Duncan by telling him that I would be taking him to some place to see if he recognized it. I drove him to the Montauk Air Force Base. He not only recognized it, he told me what the purpose was for each of the various buildings. He knew exactly where the bulletin board in the mess hall was, and many other such minute details. Obviously, he had been there before. He knew the place like the back of his hand. He provided new information about the nature of the base and what his own function had been.
Okay, and at this point, Duncan enters the transmitter building, and he goes into this sudden trance and starts spitting out all this crazy information. So Nichols brings him back to the lab, applies techniques he claimed he had learned to help Duncan unblock his memories. We might get into that a little bit later, what those techniques were. Some interesting things there. But there were layers of programming, he said, layers that were now coming out of Duncan. A lot of information concerned Montauk, and many different things were revealed until finally, and this is why, maybe for good reason, Brian had been suspicious. Too good to be true, why is this guy here? Comes out of nowhere. He blurts out that he was programmed to find Nichols, to befriend Nichols, and to kill him. And then blow up the lab, destroying all of his research. Everything that he'd been working on regarding the Montauk Project that he had suspected was going on, and all the telepathic research. Duncan appears more outraged by this, because he was obviously unaware. It's that Manchurian candidate sort of idea.
So Duncan appears more outraged than Preston Nichols.
Right. It's because he didn't know he was programmed to do this, allegedly. And at this point, he decides, I'm going to help you no matter what. Screw whoever programmed me. He switches sides.
Right.
A side that he didn't even know he was on.
Sounds like Duncan was a part of this project and then now is being used as a cover-up tool to kill Preston, who's digging too much around the reality of what happened.
Exactly.
Can you just switch allegiances if you're a Manchurian candidate? Don't they like flip a switch and then you're like, nah, must destroy.
Right, like a code name. It wasn't
Or,
Zoolander.
we used to, in the early days, talk about Project Monarch and, the butterfly symbolism, the trigger for celebrity mind control slaves,
like
that
you
kind
say,
of stuff.
like, pretty sandals.
Exactly.
Or what was the one with Al Roker?
At least remember the Holy Ghost.
Yeah.
Holy Ghost.
He just stares at the TV screen.
Check that out.
Yeah, Google Al Roker, Holy Ghost.
That is a weird video. We'll put the link in the show
Very
notes.
strange. Definitely an MKUltra agent.
Yes, 100%. Possible.
Anyway, but yeah, like what you're talking about, John, can you switch allegiances? So luckily for Preston, Duncan wasn't activated because he was deprogrammed by Preston Nichols before he could be activated. Because he was, he went into this trance.
So he realizes he remembers suddenly. He recalls what he was programmed to do, but he hasn't been triggered yet.
Right. So
Weird.
that saves him. Because the only reason he deprograms him is because he's spitting out all this stuff and realizes that he's been programmed somehow.
Right.
And so he deprograms in the way that he knows how, which we'll talk about later.
Suspend the disbelief.
Yes, exactly.
Suspend your disbelief.
Ding.
Hey, we got to use it again.
So further work with Duncan reveals even more bizarre information. He reveals that he's been involved. Okay, we haven't even talked about this yet,
Mm-hmm.
but this is so important to the story. The Philadelphia experiment super controversial, plays a huge role in this story, in this tale. And we'll get to what that exactly was, a short description of that for those who are unaware in just a moment. But let me continue on here. So he says that he had been involved in the Philadelphia experiment. He said that he and his brother Edward had served aboard the Eldridge as members of the crew. And of course, that would have been impossible for his age in the 1980s because it happened 20 years before he was born. Anyway, we'll get into all that.
Yeah, as we're about to hear in a minute, the Philadelphia experiment is integral to the Montauk Project and is directly connected. So they almost have to both exist.
Yes. Okay, so Preston has an insight.
A lot of things surfaced as a result of my work with Duncan. I started to remember things about the Montauk Project and was now certain I'd been involved. I just didn't know how or why. The puzzle was slowly clearing up. I found Duncan to be an extremely operational psychic, and through him I was able to confirm new information.
Okay, so at this point, Nichols is under the impression that he was involved in the project somehow. He's remembering what the man in the bunker,
the homeless man, told him that he used to work there.
Right. So he's remembering that. This seems to be what Duncan is hitting on, the same things. So for some reason, unbeknownst to him and the reader, he starts exploring where he's working, AIL. Maybe there's something where he's working that can explain why he would have been working on the Montauk Project or the secret clandestine operation going on.
So he's currently in, well, we can say, quote, real life, but his job at this point, as far as his own reality that he knows and remembers, is for this defense contractor, AIL, on Long Island. And yeah, he's starting to consider, did I work at Montauk?
Right. By the way, he calls it BJM we talked about this before, but worried about threats from people, worried about possible litigation.
Oh yeah, and we haven't said this, but this is also very important, that the book itself says you can take this as fact or science fiction.
That's what the co-author wrote, Peter Moon, which is a pseudonym.
It was also Nichols said that too.
But that's who wrote that part of the book.
Nichols in further interviews says the reason I said in the book that you can take it so it was both. But that's important because a lot of people will read this and there will be blogs about it and say like, it's written as science fiction. The author even says you can take it as fact or science fiction, so you can basically throw it away. But it's clear in interviews with Preston Nichols and in further writings and stuff that it's put in there for, if you believe the story, it's put in there for their protection.
Yeah.
You know, even till his death, there were things that he couldn't divulge because of concerns of his safety. If he can give so much away, but not too much without basically really risking his life.
It is interesting because you could say, you know, obviously allegedly these things. It is interesting because things later that were in the book, like, because I read the original version, and when he would say like the senator, and I was like, oh, super descriptive. That's going to help your case. The senator, random guy. Later, when I was reading, I found the silver edition, which came out like 20 years later, kind of recently. And Peter Moon, the co-author, breaks down like, oh, this was the senator. Everybody in the area knew it was Barry Goldwater. We'll get to that. But at the time, he didn't want to use Barry's name.
Right.
And he wasn't sure how the family felt.
Right.
And
just a lot of concern. That's why a lot of the details are so vague.
So sometimes when it seems suspicious, it's because of concern about liability, concern about the threat of death. Anyway, let's continue on. Okay, so he, as I said, he starts exploring where he's working, right? AIL. Strange things are happening at his workplace. He starts getting mail that he shouldn't be getting, mail addressed to him, but for people of a higher position. He starts having strange things happen where he's getting treated like he has a higher rank with other people. Strangers on the base he doesn't know. One day he's exploring the grounds. He finds a building that's super secure, but he has a hunch and he goes up to it. Surprisingly, the guard not only lets him through, but gives him a badge to go in. He's exploring this area and it's like he knows where to go in this high security facility. And he ends up in an very nice office space. And on the desk is a nameplate that says, Preston Nichols, Assistant Director.
So this is at AIL where he works, but he doesn't know that he's living another life.
Right.
At this defense contractor.
Yes. He's discovering, although he's not sure yet exactly what's going on, that he is not only a technical engineer at AIL, but he is secretly, even to himself, working on the Montauk Project in the defunct base down the road as an assistant director overseeing technical aspects of time portal creations, mind-altering experiments, mind control experiments. This is where it gets crazy. This is where he starts to remember what's going on.
Yeah, he said at one point that he didn't realize while working at AIL, but if he wanted to, he's getting mail from, this other version of himself, this like higher ranking version of himself that's apparently from the future. But he said if he wanted to talk to him, he could have just called him up on the switchboard at his office and he had no idea because they both existed there. But this is where it gets all complicated because there's time travel and...
Yes. But this is where we need to step back to what we were just talking about, the Philadelphia experiment.
Yes.
Because this is the impetus for the entire project of Montauk.
Yeah.
And all the preceding projects.
So how did Montauk get here? How did it start? And why is the Philadelphia experiment connected? So the Philadelphia experiment allegedly happened during the verified real CIA project known as Project Rainbow. Now that's interesting too if you know Stranger Things because of the Rainbow Room.
Oh, yeah.
Right? All these Easter egg stuff thrown in. So Project Rainbow was the name given by the CIA to a research project aimed at reducing the radar cross-section of the Lockheed U-2 and lowering the chance that it would be detected and tracked by Soviet radars during its overflights of the USSR. Now that's the official version of what it is.
Right. That's during the Cold War. They were trying to find a way to cloak their high-flying aircraft so they could take pictures of Soviet Russia during the Cold War.
Right. Now that's the official story. You know, Nichols suggesting that this began much earlier and actually really goes back to Tesla and their early experiments.
World War II.
Yeah. And even earlier in the 30s. But then, World War II is where it really starts. And then during this project where they're trying to basically create what they call the electromagnetic bottle, where they can hide a naval ship using electromagnetics and Tesla coils to cloak it so that radar will bounce off or be absorbed by this energy, this field. The experiment of this is called the Philadelphia experiment.
Right. This is a whole other thing where it's written by another guy who initially proposed this thing, which is a whole other episode, but it's in this story.
So it seems to be the case that the Rainbow Project was real, CIA project, but the fact that the Philadelphia experiment took place is controversial, but it would have been inside this Rainbow Project.
Yeah.
Now, for those of you who don't know about the Philadelphia experiment, this was the catastrophe of the Philadelphia experiment. This is a description of the effects of what happened. And there's different ways that the legend has gone. This comes from Neil Parks, who wrote Alternate Universes, Time Travel, and the Unexplained.
So at this point, they're running this experiment. They're loading up the generators, the coils on the ship, and they're getting ready to test to see if they can make this ship invisible to the human eye. That's all they're trying to do.
Well, they're trying to do radar. They didn't realize it would actually disappear.
Right.
So this is what happens. The test had managed to render the entire ship out of phase with the surrounding universe, which is why it was able to travel from Philadelphia to Norfolk instantly. This phasing effect had drastic effects on the crew members. During the experiment, crew members found they could walk through solid objects, and when the field was shut off, the men were found embedded in the bulkheads, decks, and railings of the ship, with results so gruesome some men went mad. So they're stuck in parts of the ship. Afterwards, several crew members simply vanished. A few disappeared into thin air. One, later eating dinner with his family, rose up, walked through a wall.
Honey, what are you doing?
And was never seen again. Some men entered into what was called the, quote, freeze. This is where a man faded from view, unable to move, speak, or otherwise affect his surroundings. Initially, the freeze effect lasted only a few minutes to a few hours. Interestingly enough, invisible crewmen were still visible to other sailors who had survived the original experiment. After a while, the freeze effect lasted for days or months and became known as the deep freeze. Other terms include caught in the flow, caught in the push, get stuck, go blank, hell incorporated, or stuck in molasses. The deep freeze could drive a man insane in a very short order. So that's one description of the effects of the men who were allegedly involved on the USS Eldridge in the Philadelphia experiment.
That's the most extreme I've ever read. I usually just hear like people were fused in the bulkheads when they came back from this disappearance.
Right. The
through
freeze
time.
and the deep freeze, I'm not sure where, this specifically comes from, but there are people that have corroborated this. There's a guy on another ship, I think the USS Liberty. His name's Carl M. Allen. He alleges he actually saw the ship appear.
Yeah, there's plenty of reasons to doubt the story as well. There's a lot of debate around it. That's for another episode. We're just including it here because this is a basis for the story and for the projects that continue.
Yeah, exactly. So after this catastrophe, according to Preston Nichols, a man by the name of von Neumann, he's brought into the project. Now, he's a real guy. He was a mathematician from the Manhattan Project.
Right.
But he was brought in allegedly to work on the human factor. In other words, what caused this? Why did the men go mad?
Right, to focus on the mental side of it, not necessarily the physical fusing of people into bulkheads or even leaving time. But why did people lose their minds?
Right. And allegedly, not only was von Neumann working on this, but so was Albert Einstein and Nikola Tesla. And it is true that Einstein and Neumann were both part of the, I forget the name of the institute at Princeton. So these people all work together at the same time. There is a tie-in historically with these people. So, I mean, you could see why some of this would be possible.
And by the way, this von Neumann stuff and these later projects coming up, this is going back into Nichols' lore.
Right.
Not the original Philadelphia experiment lore, as far as I know.
Correct.
So the Philadelphia experiment gets absorbed by the Phoenix Project, which later becomes Montauk. Phoenix Project has 3 parts to it. Basically, it becomes an umbrella term for Rainbow, stuff involving Wilhelm Rieck and orgone, and orgasm research we're not going to get into today. It gets really wild.
Oh yeah, Project Phoenix. Yeah, so the Brookhaven Labs is working on Project Phoenix, the kind of partially the remnants of the Philadelphia experiment, the Project Rainbow. And at this point, they have to report to Congress, and they have been reporting, but I guess Congress pays attention now. They see some of the disturbing reports of what's going on, mind control experiments, all this kind of stuff. And at this point, thinking, well, we are uncomfortable with this technology because what if someone does it to us? People in Congress, they wouldn't be too happy. So Congress in 1969 disbands Project Phoenix over that concern of mind control could be used on them. But at this point, Brookhaven, the lab institute, has all this technology, all this research on their hands. What are they going to do?
Right. They've got cloaking technology. They have mind control technology. And the mind control technology came from experiments using a chair and using alternating currents to somehow read the aura of a person and put it onto a screen.
Yeah, we're getting ahead of ourselves over there.
Yeah, but that's Project Phoenix. So if we're going to mention Project Phoenix, anyways, we'll get to that later in the experiments. But
so the point is, the Brookhaven has all this stuff. They don't want to stop. Why would you? They need somewhere to go, and they need financial help because Congress is no longer footing the bill. They have ways to pay for it, and this goes into a whole other part of the lore. But they talk to the military because they know the military can provide the security, the isolation, the protection, essentially to keep working on this. And the military would love this kind of technology, mind control technology. They could stop a war before it starts, conquer their enemies, whatever. So they talk to the military, and the military's like, yeah, right down the road.
We have the perfect place.
We have the perfect place, the Montauk Air Force Base. We can retrofit the radar tower. It's perfect for what you need for oscillating radio signals and whatever. So that's where they move it.
It has a dish that can broadcast 425 to 450 megahertz signal, which is what you need to manipulate the mind. So this is when Project Montauk officially starts in the 70s, and that's where we'll pick it up after the break. What's coming up in the expansion?
Okay, so you guys are about to hear a preview clip from the expansion. The expansion is going to be wild, as they say.
Literally an expansion of this episode.
Yeah, it's more, it's more about the crazier elements of what happens in this episode. Everything from reptilian abductions with the real L, as I call her, future predictions from, we haven't even gotten into this yet, but in the Philadelphia experiment, Duncan, who we've already met, and his brother, Ed, they're sent to the future during the Philadelphia experiment, allegedly, to 2137, and they learn about the war. Now, this is interesting. There's a war coming, guys, between 2000 and 2025, which is right now. This was predicted, again, in like the early 90s or whatever. The war between Russia and China and the West.
Yeah,
and it creates...
definitely not out of the realm of possibility.
Yeah, that combined with cataclysms and stuff end up creating a devastating world. And when they jump to the year 2137, they tell them about this, and like they're basically rebuilding at that point, but there's martial law, there's different...
In 2137?
That's what they jump to, but they talk about when this all happened.
That's a huge chasm.
Yeah.
Time.
From 2025 to 2137, things break down that slowly?
No, things break down after 2025, but it takes like 100 years to get back to the point where they have hospitals, because they end up in the hospital after the Philadelphia experiment in 2137.
Anyways, it's
a whole other thing. It's crazy, but it'll be really interesting.
Like that.
We're also going to go to Mars through portals, potentially, and all the way to 6000 something AD with a golden horse statue in the middle of a decaying city, and what the children have to read, the time-traveling children have to read off the horse.
And we'll also hear clips from Preston Nichols, who John's been voicing here, as well as Al Balick describing some of the technology and the future predictions, just so you can hear their own voices in the expansion. So guys...
And we'll talk more about the show.
And we'll probably talk about Stranger Things.
Guess what, guys? We are taking a break.
Yes.
That's true.
So we will be gone for a couple weeks.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great time. If you are missing us to become an expansion member, we will have
yes.
a host of interesting topics to cover.
Yes.
I mean, that's really not what I meant to say. We have tons of content over there for you. So if you miss us, I think we will be dropping something for the expansion members.
Maybe a live stream
during the break. Mm-hmm.
But we will be doing something for you guys over on the expansion side. So if you miss us during this break, definitely head over and help support the show, help keep us going, and get your brain holes filled.
Yes!
Yeah, get your hands on over 60 fresh episodes, just as rich, just as beautifully sound designed and investigated.
Yes.
Hell yeah.
That's how I will put that.
Do it.
All right, check out this preview of the expansion.
Access granted.
F is just ahead of me, at the next hallway. F keeps going straight with the two guys, but we turn to the right and walk a few feet to an elevator door. Terry has a credit card and puts it into a slot next to the door. The slot is vertical and there are two lights above it, one red, one green. The door opens and we go inside, but there are no buttons to push. We're going down. Then the door opens and it's much darker here. And it smells funny, like a basement with a cesspool overflow problem. We turn right and go a few feet, then turn left. I'm so cold. There's a door on my left. Terry opens it. This room is so dark I can hardly see. There's almost no furniture in it. There's something that looks like a padded table. They help me on it and lay me down. Now I'm really cold. One guy says,
Do we just leave her here?
and Terry answers.
She's not going anywhere.
They leave the room. I can't seem to move anything but my eyes. Why am I here? I don't like this. Over to my left, something moves. It's coming closer. I can see it better. Oh my God, it's a monster!
Now, at this point, she jumps out of the chair in the hypnotic regression session because she's so terrified and overwhelmed with emotion. Finally, the doctor gets her to calm down and she wants to continue.
Yeah, think of that scene from what's that film with the owls, the alien abduction with
The Fourth Kind?
The Fourth Kind, where the people are
Freaking out?
Yeah.
Yeah. Then she continues.
What I see is a creature about 6 to 7 feet tall. His ears are large and pointed at the top. His eyes are bright yellow gold and seem to glow. He has pointy teeth and a large wrinkle on his forehead. And he has a tail. He's coming towards me. I have never been so scared in my life. He comes to the foot of the table.
When the cool light of the blood moon beckons, the midnight call won't be ignored. And every creature of the night looking for love needs the right scent to snare their heartthrob. In partnership with Ruddy Man Grooming, the Brothers of the Belief Hole have curated Nightstalker. A beard oil scent that blends the masculine earthy forest aroma with the seductive notes of tobacco and vanilla. For a subtly sweet balance that will have your partner purring late into the evening. However the night moves you, Nightstalker beard oil is your loyal companion. Yes! So head over to BeliefHole.com and click on the Nightstalker button. Available in beard oil, balms, and butters. And don't forget to use the code BeliefHole for 15% off your purchase. That's BeliefHole, one word, all lowercase. Nightstalker. For a superior breed of beard.
Hey, Holers, we're back.
Holers? Belieflings, you mean?
Holes.
Remember we had that debate? Such a massive debate.
the Belief Warrior sting we had?
Belief warrior, warrior.
I don't think we ever actually did that.
Oh, really? Oh, wait, that was part of that stinger. She's a lady of magic taste.
Oh, for Cat.
I really embarrassed to listen to it the other day. I was like, oh, I'm sorry. Let John do these.
You're like a knockoff Jack Black. Yes, welcome back, Holers, Belieflings. However you
We've got
identify.
a special. Thank you.
Oh, we do. I almost forgot. We have another Skywheel Rider.
Skywheel Rider. Skywheel Rider.
Yes!
Never gets old. Oh, let that slap. Welcome our newest Skywheel Rider, Rene Benitez, or Little Elm Tree. I think he's a woodworker.
Sure it's not Benitez?
That could be Benitez.
Either way, he's a wonderful man.
Yes.
Either way, thank you so much for supporting the show. We really, really appreciate it. That actually, being that tier really does help us to stay on the air.
You're literally a top tier guy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for those of you who don't know, you can sign up to be an expansion member for $5.50 right now. But then there are other tiers. Black Eyed Cool Kids is $7, gets you a shout out on the show at the end of the episode. But then there are people that go above and beyond and either become Dogman Whisperers for $10 or the highest tier, which is our friend Renee at $50 for Skywheel Rider.
Yes, thank you so much.
But guess what? At the end of the day, we're going to be doing all you guys that have been waiting, all the Dogman Whisperers.
Shout out people of interest.
Black Eyed Cool Kids.
We're going to shout you out today. And thank you for being patient.
Yes.
We love you and we really do appreciate the help. It is massively important to us.
Yes, absolutely.
For the few of you that are left that signed up earlier before we started the new tiers that still get a thank you at the end, hang in there. We'll get to you probably on the next episode.
Yeah. So another great reason to be an expansion member is because during the break that we are taking over the next few weeks, we will be doing a live stream just for expansion members.
And it's going to be epic and you don't want to miss it.
Absolutely.
And you'll have access to everything else that we do. So great time to sign up.
Yeah, it's a ton of fun. You can see previews we've done on YouTube. Summer fun just for you guys. So tune into that. That will be
Friday, July 22nd at 8:30 Eastern Standard Time.
Looking forward to seeing you there.
And without further ado,
back to the show. So let's get back into the wonderful world of Montauk. The beautiful land and the stranger things that took place there. Allegedly.
Allegedly.
I was thinking about titling this episode Allegedly. There's a lot of allegedly in this episode, but it's a fantastic story, that's for sure. So when we left for the break, we were talking about the progression of the projects that went all the way from allegedly the Philadelphia experiment in the 1940s and even earlier, all the way up through the other projects leading us to the Montauk Project. Now let's talk about some of the technology they were working on. This is really the meat of the fascinating experimentation that was going on. The things that bend the mind and conjure concepts of science fiction and horror, for sure. So let's begin with the Montauk chair. Jeremy, tell us a little about the Montauk chair. This is integral to the experiments going on there.
So as Preston Nichols describes in the book, the Montauk chair, the technology was developed initially in the 1950s by ITT, which was the International Telephone and Telegraph Company. They developed a sensor technology that at some point eventually was built into the chair.
Right.
And the technology essentially was a mind-reading technology. It could pick up on electromagnetic functions of the human brain and translate that into an understandable format. A digital representation. And they go into the book, they break down using the Cray 1 supercomputer, which was first installed at Los Alamos Laboratories.
Also, allegedly, I mean, if it happened here, this would have been years before the construction of it. So again, it's like earlier tech.
Yeah, the timeline's kind of weird because he references in the book 1950s, but of course, their experiments with the chair was going on in the 70s, and the Cray 1 computer was built in the 70s, and the IBM 360, which is eventually what displayed the digital image. So you have all this technology, all of it seems to be relevant to the time, but the timeline's kind of confusing. Could this have even happened? Computers, I mean, this computer was like 5 tons or something. It was a supercomputer, gigantic, from the 70s, but could it have processed this kind of information?
Right.
Maybe with the help of a telepath, potentially?
Oh.
Maybe the help with Syrians.
Yes, aliens.
From Sirius. Allegedly, that's one of the ideas Preston Nichols posits. How is this possible to project human thoughts just using these computers? Eventually, they use a telepath, but he suggests that there was suggestion that it may have been help from, quote, extraterrestrials.
Yeah, it seems like there is, throughout the Montauk Project conspiracy, there are points in the development of the technology where extraterrestrials come in and aid. And that seems to be a little bit, when I'm reading it, a little bit of a catch-all, like this worked because, well, aliens helped, and then with much hard work and computer crunching, humans were able to continue the project. So, suspend your disbelief for this, but
there's a lot of technical kind of jargon, and some would say gibberish in the book, and some say it's all gobbledygook.
Of course, it wouldn't be the first time that we've discussed the ideas of alien involvement in technological growth on Earth. That is not that out there of an idea. So again, it's all these different different
inner-Earth
concepts.
civilizations.
Right. We've talked about this before, so again, not completely impossible.
Right. But regardless, they had this chair, the Montauk chair, as it was called. More detail in the book on how it was constructed. This is something the Montauk Project, after hearing about it from ITT, they wanted this technology because they wanted to be able to create a mind-reading machine that could also be a transmitter.
Right.
You could hopefully project realities. They basically were concerned about the Philadelphia experiment, what happened to the men, and they wanted to be able to use the cloaking technology, even time travel, which is what they believe the Philadelphia experiment had done, 40 years or 12 seconds, depending on what story you believe. But that ability to travel through time and the effect of the mind warp on the people, the destruction of the mind because of the way that, traveling through time is set up, because according to Preston Nichols, you have a, what's it called? A time
reference?
Time reference. Each person is born with a time reference that keeps you anchored in your timeline. And through the Philadelphia experiment, that was lost and people went crazy. So the idea is that this chair, eventually with a telepath involved or a psychic of some kind, they could project a reality around the minds, basically insulating anyone involved in time travel or in these kind of portals to protect them. It all sounds super out there.
Yeah, it also becomes nefarious, not just protecting people, but how do we control people's minds using this chair? And that comes up later.
Oh yeah, because in the late 70s, 77, the transmitter was eventually used to reproduce thought forms.
Right.
They started, specifically Duncan Cameran, who again is the guy that meets Preston Nichols in the future later on, and he starts recalling this stuff. He allegedly was eventually able to pull things from the ether, manifest objects, thought forms into reality, create realities, affect the minds of others eventually using this chair.
And this alien computer system.
Allegedly alien.
Yes. Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about that. Let's hear from Preston Nichols what exactly Duncan was doing in this chair and what was happening here. Jonathan.
What Duncan thought of as a subjective reality would be created as an objective reality, either solid or transparent, depending on the circumstances. For example, he could think of an entire building, and that building would appear on base. This type of experimentation was routine. Now they wanted to see what they could do with it. The first experiment was called the seeing eye. With the lock of a person's hair or other appropriate object in his hand, Duncan could concentrate on the person and be able to see as if he was seeing through their eyes, hearing through their ears, and feeling through their body. He could actually see through other people anywhere on the planet. This style of experimentation was extensive, but I don't know how far it was taken. It is truly incredible that such a feat could be accomplished. However, the agenda employed was more sinister than incredible. They were interested in controlling how human beings think.
That description reminded me of X-Men,
Yeah.
where Professor Xavier's in a chair in that dome thing. I forget what it's called.
That's true, yeah.
And he's trying to find other mutants, and he's seeing around the world and seeing through people's eyes. Anyways, but the idea is called witnessing. It's a psychic idea. The idea of holding an object and seeing or sensing something about a person using a lock of hair or a personal artifact. But this is when, yes, when they mentioned the nefarious aspect of this, controlling people's mind, this is when Duncan becomes involved in these exercises of putting his thoughts into targets' minds, including the community at large, the community at Montauk. And this is one of the conspiracy theories around the story. People start experiencing changes in their perception or changes in their mood based on when the tower is active. And just a quick summary here, I thought this was interesting. This comes from an interview with The Sun, where Preston sort of draws into focus what we just discussed in this chair and what we're about to discuss
regarding time travel.
He says, quote, "We began to look at how you could interface minds with computer systems, but it soon evolved into developing a mind control device. Later, it was discovered that if the individual whose mind was powering the machine, in this case Duncan, could think of other time periods, this machine could generate a vortex there, essentially a time machine." And this is where we get into the beginning of the time travel experiments with this chair, with Duncan, with the psychic portal that he's opening and using derelicts around town, kidnapping them for inclusion unwillingly into these experiments. And I've got a quick thing I want to read from his book here. There were also other psychics, but Duncan was the first they had used, and he was in the chair 90% of the time the system was in operation. By this time, the computer system was huge and was housed inside the control room next to the radar tower. Duncan would start out sitting in the chair. Then the transmitter would be turned on. His mind would be blank and clear. He would then be directed to concentrate on an opening in time from, say, 1980, which was the current time, to 1990. At this point, a hole or time portal would appear right in the center of the Delta T antenna. You could walk through the portal from 1980 to 1990. There was an opening that you could look into. It looked like a circular corridor with a light at the other end. The time door would remain open as long as Duncan would concentrate on 1990 and 1980. I've been told by those who entered the tunnel that it looked like a spiral similar to science fiction style renderings of a vortex. When outside the tunnel, it looked like you were looking through space, from one circular opening through space to a circular but little bit smaller window at the other end. From 1980 to late 1981, the time function was calibrated. At first, the time portals would drift away. One might go through the time portal and come back out in 1960. But when one went back to find it later, although it was still being tracked in real time, the portal would not appear where it should have been. One could easily get lost in time and space.
And many did, allegedly.
It was routine to create a tunnel, grab somebody off the street, and send them down. Most of the time, these people were winos or derelicts, whose absence wouldn't create a furor. If they returned, they would make a full report on what they had encountered. Most of the winos used in the experiments were sobered up for a week before entering a portal, but many didn't make it back. We don't know how many people are still floating around in time, whenever, wherever, and however. So obviously, bold claims here.
Yeah, and this, speaking of the people that were taken, in the expansion we'll get more into the Montauk boys, the kids that were allegedly abducted or
that have come forward,
lured into participating between the ages of 9 and 18. But there's witness testimony in the expansion from alleged people that were involved, kids that were involved. So definitely gets interesting.
Okay, so all this experimentation's going on, the time travel, everything is coming to a head, right?
Then in 1983, something very strange happens, and the date is significant. It's August 12th, 1983. Exactly 40 years to the day of the Philadelphia experiment.
Right.
And it appears that at this point, the machine, as he says, locks up with the Philadelphia experiment.
Suddenly, the equipment appeared to drop into sync with something else.
Yeah, and that is the USS Eldridge during the Philadelphia experiment, because according to Nichols, time works as far as these kind of anchored vortexes where they could travel reliably between times. There will always be a link up at 20-year intervals because of the alleged 20-year biorhythmic pattern of the
cycles
Earth.
of the Earth,
yeah, pulses of the Earth.
There's a lot. There's a lot in this book, a lot of diagrams, a lot of
but
stuff.
But the key is every 20 years this can happen, and allows for a stable wormhole, essentially. That's why we get it between the Philadelphia Project in 43 and the Montauk Project in 83.
It's funny because if you think about like the things that would come later, like Back to the Future, 20 years, I guess that was before. I'm not sure, I guess. But Dark, same thing. There's these 20-year decades or whatever. Yeah, these alignments of time where you can move through. Anyway, yes, interesting. But how does it all come to a head, right? This is where it comes to the head. And this is where that we keep hearing about through Preston and through rumors in town of this beast that was unleashed on the facility that inevitably ended up closing down the project, right? This beast that was loosed throughout the facility. And this is that story.
3 colleagues and myself had been privately voicing misgivings about the project over a period of months. We had talked about the pitfalls of dealing with time and how this might affect the karma of the planet. We hoped the project would truncate itself. Consequently, our little cabal created a contingency program that only Duncan could activate. It was designed to crash the entire project. We finally decided we had enough of the whole experiment. The contingency program was activated by someone approaching Duncan while he was in the chair and simply whispering, "The time is now." At this moment, he let loose a monster from his subconscious, and the transmitter actually portrayed a hairy monster. It was big, hairy, hungry, and nasty, but it didn't appear underground in the null point. It showed up somewhere on the base. It would eat anything it could find, and it smashed everything in sight. Several different people saw it, but almost everyone described a different beast. It was either 9 feet tall or 30 feet tall, depending on who saw it. I personally believe it was about 9 or 10 feet in height. No one was in any frame of mind to calmly and collectively analyze its exact nature. It was terrifying.
That's kind of interesting because I did some other research and I used Albert Rosales' collection of humanoid encounters, reports from everywhere. And at this time, I found sightings of something in Montauk.
Oh, around this time?
Yeah, they vary slightly, but that's the general height is 9 to 10 feet. Hairy or covered in some kind of yellow ooze of some kind, but just odd timing for this thing to appear independently of the Montauk Project.
And are you going to talk about some of those reports in the expansion?
Yeah, I'll cover that a little bit in the expansion, as well as it ties into the real L, as I call her. I forget her name right now. Miriam, maybe?
Michelle Guerin.
But that'll be in the expansion and her experiences with an underground reptilian, terrible things that happened to her, but her eventual training into psychic work, just like the character Elle in Stranger Things has.
Oh, also in the expansion, we will touch on the area of Montauk and the alleged mystical properties of Turtle Cove.
Yeah, we didn't even get into that. There's all kinds of
ley lines,
suggestions
native lore, allegedly.
Alleged native lore with the Montauk people or the Montaukett people, the Indians there. Thomas Jefferson ties in Rosicrucians. I mean, it gets real crazy, and we've corroborated as much as we could, but it gets real interesting in the expansion, guys.
We'll dissect that in the expansion. But after this beast unleashes its fury, this subconscious beast, into manifestation on the grounds.
So everything is going crazy at this point. The vortex is spiraling. It's locked up with the Philadelphia experiment. You can see the USS Eldridge through the portal. Duncan has manifested this creature from the ether, the beast from the id, as they call it, that's terrorizing above ground right now. So at this point, it's Preston Nichols' job as a part of this cabal's plot, their plan to shut this down. With everything going crazy, his supervisor orders the crew to shut off the generators.
Shut it down!
To stop whatever phenomena is going on at this point. This doesn't work. So then they unsuccessfully attempt to shut down the transmitter at Montauk. They go to the power station and disconnect the base from the Long Island Lighting Company, but the power keeps going. Then they go to the power station and cut the wires leading into the ground from the big transformers. And this is important. Nichols puts an acetylene torch, if that's how you pronounce it, acetylene torch on his back and cuts the wires going into the ground. And finally, Nichols cuts enough of the machinery apart that the transmitter just groans and stops. All the lights go off. They'd done it. It was at this point that the portal closed and the beast stopped moving and faded back into the ether. And if you watch Nichols's home video footage of the base going through it. He points out places where the torch was used to cut through into the electronics to stop the project from happening. It's a really interesting, convoluted story, but there's some kind of video evidence that he has. If you really watch it, it tells the story. Is it real? Is it not? Evidence is there, but it's up for you to decide, I suppose.
Yes.
I'll briefly mention, as I said, the story gets much crazier. The locking up of this time portal in 1983, because of the biorhythmic undulations, I guess, of the Earth, the pattern of every 20 years, this lockup can happen because of the biorhythmic patterns of the Earth. 1983 to 1943 locks up with the Eldridge, August 12th, 1943. But the weirdest part is that on the ship, we've been talking about Duncan, the psychic who is recalling all these memories.
The one in the chair, the one who came to Preston's house and tried to kill him, then befriended him,
right?
Worked with him.
Well, all this information comes from a man by the name of Al Bielek, who is Duncan's brother, Ed.
Claims to be.
So Ed Cameron and Duncan Cameron are both allegedly on the Philadelphia experiment, on the ship, the USS Eldridge, and that's how Duncan Cameron gets involved in the first place, right?
It's a time paradox.
It's a time paradox. But the reason Ed Cameron gets to become Al Bielek is because, unlike his brother Duncan, who comes in and becomes a part of the experiment, right, and is this telepath or whatever, Ed Cameron, Al Bielek, decides to stay in 1943. And this is after they've been sent to the future, had their adventures in 2137 that I mentioned with the experiment. It goes all crazy. But the point is, Ed, Duncan's brother, who Duncan we know, Ed stays back in time, but eventually gets pulled to the future in 1947.
Into Montauk.
They bring him to Montauk. Then they age regress him and shrink his body down to the size of an infant.
1 year old.
This is Ed Cameron, Duncan's brother. They shrink him down to the size of a 1-year-old, wipe his memory, and give him to Mr. and Mrs. Bielek because they'd lost a child like the year before. So raise this infant. So he grows up, joins the Navy again, has no memory of the Montauk Project, but ends up eventually coming back to the base and working as a contractor, just like Preston Nichols. And then slowly starts to recall his memories after being sent to kill Preston Nichols.
Anyway, it's a lot. Yeah. If we talk about it in the expansion, we'll explain that further. But basically just to say there is a time paradox where a man who is real, Al Bielek, claims to be a person who was born in 1920s.
16 initially and then 27.
1916. Anyways, there's a time paradox. He's this guy's brother. It's too much to get into right now, but we should say that it is a thing that is involved in this story. It's actually a really interesting story where there's a time loop where they end up coming back through the Philadelphia experiment. And the only reason that this whole project, Montauk, exists and these other Phoenix projects was because of their trip through time that we haven't talked about. It's too much to get into, which is why I wasn't going to bring it up here. We'll talk about the expansion. But yes, any questions on it? But you don't need to know much about that to know that the Beast they released, that was part of the reason, all is to say is it's part of the reason why they decided too many time crimes were happening. The fact that there were now two people who were the same person existing in the same time space coming through from the Philadelphia experiment. Let's shut this baby down, shut her down. Let's release the Beast. That's one of the reasons why they released it. Okay, that's kind of to bring that into.
So that's like where the Demogorgon comes from, probably that idea. Or is that what it's called?
Exactly. Yeah, Demogorgon. Yeah. I mean, that's would be the analogy. Would be this is the Beast that.
I mean, obviously, there's a lot more literary license in the actual show.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, that's also obviously the Demogorgon we mentioned before. Comes from Dungeons and Dragons, right?
Oh, right.
But what's interesting,
I didn't even realize that, and even the new one, are they all? Was
Vecna?
there?
Because you weren't cool enough to play it like we were.
So in each season, is there a new Dungeons and Dragons character?
Vecna, and I think the Mind Flayer, wasn't that also Dungeons and Dragons?
Pretty sure, yeah. We were more Vampire the Masquerade, so I didn't do too much of the D&D house.
But anyways, what's really interesting, John, is when I first started researching this, I was trying to figure out who is this Duncan guy, Duncan Cameron, because he existed in two different times. His story gets real weird, but I found a really great breakdown of him. And I'm reading this like it's finally a clear description of who he is and everything. And then at the bottom it says, how to play Duncan in a campaign. It's like, what? And then I look at it and I realize this is a role-playing guide for the Montauk Project.
Based off D&D rules.
Based off, the hero system. Weird, again, synchronicity, the hero system like Camp Hero. But this role-playing game about Montauk came out right after Preston Nichols' book, but way before Stranger Things.
Right.
So there's a role-playing game which is such a theme in Stranger Things about the Montauk Project with these characters.
You wonder if they played that.
You wonder if maybe the Duffer Brothers played it or, had heard about the role-playing game. Because role-playing is such a part of it. Or it could just be a synchronicity.
Right.
Which is very strange.
Interesting. Yeah. Interesting stuff, though.
Very interesting. Good job, guys. That was a lot to present.
Oh, we're almost done. We're at the evidence. We're going to discuss the reality, the possible reality, what evidence came about. So regarding what happens after this? He's recovered all these memories. He knows what he thinks is the truth about this beast being unleashed. This whole project, he realizes they need to do something, right? We know this stuff. They're starting to get people visiting them. They're starting to grow concerned about safety. They decide to give a lecture. They decide to start publishing material about this. A small group of them, Preston and his other allies in this truth campaign, you could call it.
Duncan and Al Bailey.
Yeah, so in 86, they go to what's called the United States Psychotronics Association in Chicago, and they create an uproar. Luckily for them, they're able to get in contact with someone in the United States Senate who believes their story, or at least is curious enough to investigate on his own into the experiences that they've had and into their crazy story. This is what he says about that in his book.
We decided to feed the information to the federal government. One of my associates knew the nephew of a senior senator from the Southwest. The nephew, who we will call Lenny, worked for the senator. We gave the information to Lenny, who passed it to his uncle. This information included pictures of the orders given to the different military personnel, which we had found strewn about the base. The senator did a personal investigation and verified that military technicians had in fact been assigned to the base. The senator also discovered that the base was decommissioned, derelict, and mothballed since 1969. Having served his country as an Air Force general, he was particularly interested to know why Air Force personnel were working on a derelict base, and where did the money come from to open up the base and run it. After they did their own investigation and saw the pictures and documents we supplied them, there was no question that the base had been active. They verified that Fort Hero, which is the name of the original World War I base that surrounds the entire area of the Air Force Base, and Montauk, were indeed derelict and were simply listed as property held by the General Services Administration since 1970.
So this is what really interested who we later learned to be Barry Goldwater, a senior senator at the time, but eventually a candidate for president, who would have had my vote, by the way. So he gets involved in this because he wants to know, he's ex-Air Force, why are there active Air Force, but why is the base on record as being derelict? So he spends time looking into this. There's rumors around town that there's some senator peeking through fences. This is all confirmed. And at the time, even though in the book it says the senator, people in the association and people in town knew who it was. So he completes his investigation. He doesn't find any trace of government funding. He can't find any confirmation of where the money came from to run this facility. And there's no oversight committees, no payments going. So there is a rumor that it was Nazi gold. There was a train.
Some outside funding. There wasn't government, right?
Right. But we do know this was running. We don't know how. There was no paper trail, which is very strange. So eventually he retires. At the time of the book's published in 92, allegedly his nephew tells Preston that he did reopen the investigation into it, but there's no new information.
Right. And what I find fascinating about the allegation that Barry Goldwater was the senator involved in shutting this down is because, I've looked this up online, Barry Goldwater was involved. There's a document online. It's basically a document about the joint hearing before the Select Committee on Intelligence on MKUltra, the CIA's program of research and behavioral modification, which was held on August 3rd, 1977.
Right. So he would have interest in this because
he was the vice chairman on the
reviewing of the operation.
The Select Committee on Intelligence reviewing MKUltra, which is a very similar program, and allegations the same, proven. So he was aware of this going on with MKUltra. He was a part of the group that shut it down essentially, or oversaw the shutting down. The tisk about what you're doing with this Project MKUltra. He's very much obviously aware of that. So it would make sense that he would be the one or a guy involved in looking into the Montauk Project, at least believing that it could be happening.
Exactly.
So I found that really interesting. And there, one quote from this document, from the hearing rather, on MKUltra is, quote, "The records reveal a far more extensive series of experiments than had previously been thought. 86 universities or institutions were involved. New instances of unethical behavior were revealed. The CIA's program of human experimentation of the 50s and 60s violated the American people's trust throughout the program, and again on the day the bulk of the agency's records were destroyed in 1973, hence the cover-up." So Goldwater, knowing this, would have been very interested to hear about the allegations of MKUltra, and it makes sense that he would be there investigating.
Especially a project that allegedly starts right when the other project he shut down ended.
Right.
Just very interesting. He was an interesting guy, too. He had allegedly had this really fascinating discussion with an Army colonel about what was held in the Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio.
Oh, right.
Where he had said, basically the guy had said...
E.T. Craft or something.
And he asked him about it, and the guy said he'd never seen him mad in his entire life, but he was furious. He said, if you ever ask me again about that, I'm never speaking to you again.
I think the government does know. Barry Goldwater, senator, presidential candidate, and believer. I can't back that up, but I think that at Wright Patterson Field, if you could get into certain places, you'd find out what the Air Force and the government knows about UFOs.
From his ham radio shack outside Phoenix, the senator disclaims direct knowledge of UFOs, but he does confirm a disturbing story about an exchange with General Curtis LeMay.
Reportedly, a spaceship landed, and it was all hushed up, quieted. I called Curtis LeMay, and I said, General, I know we have a room at Wright Patterson where you put all this secret stuff. Can I go in there? I've never heard him get mad, but he got madder than hell at me, cussed me out, said, don't ever ask me that question again.
Anyway, let's wrap it up with what is the evidence, the recent evidence that has come to light. Is there any truth to the story insofar as physical investigation?
Yeah.
Relatively recently, there was a film documentary done
called Dark Files. And I think the most interesting thing to come out of this was the VHS tapes that were recorded in the 90s from these kids that would essentially hop the fence and record around. And one guy who really, really documented this stuff and kept track of all the records of what he found was a guy by the name of Brian Minnick. And now he filmed in different places. I think one of the most important places he filmed was inside what was called the Acid House.
Right. Montauk boys who had come out had said that allegedly they were given mind-altering drugs for these experiments for mind control.
Like LSD.
And said that there was a sunken house where there were rooms that had hallucinogenic patterns, things like that, psychedelic patterns. And this is outrightly denied by anyone who was ever involved at the base. But what is found in this video footage from the late 90s, early 2000s, it's this room in this house. And in this room, and at first glance, it looks like graffiti, right? It looks like, this doesn't look like a wallpaper or pattern or anything. But on close inspection, I don't know if you can see it in this picture, but look, if you look at the ceiling, I have a close-up of this. They make this point in the documentary. It's a clean ceiling. It's not someone in there spray painting.
The paint goes all the way up to the wall, or all the way up to where the ceiling meets the ceiling, but the ceiling has no paint on it. You know, the idea being if these weird psychedelic-ish paint blobs and shapes on the wall, if it was just graffiti, you'd see marks of graffiti on the wall as well. But I think even more importantly, the outlet covers, we'll have screenshots of this, guys. The outlet covers are over top of these patterns and markings. In other words, the graffiti does not cross over onto the outlet covers, the light switch covers,
right?
Meaning that this was put there purposely and had put the covers put on afterwards. So it couldn't be graffiti from further days. And it looks very vague, blurry blobs of color. But after
20 years,
30 years or whatever, who knows what it looked like originally. But they're definitely, and they interviewed some researchers in psychedelics and said,
yeah, I have that here. So when the psychic researchers were asked to look at these pictures, two psychedelic researchers, one David Nutt and Robert Carhart Harris, they were shown these images of this quote acid house and these rooms in here and the wallpaper pattern, and they both said that these do look like psychedelic patterns. One of the other three said he didn't think so, but these two did. These were definitely psychedelic patterns.
So just an interesting.
There's also wallpaper, John, that we don't have in here. We'll have all these in the show notes, these images, but I thought that was one of the most interesting parts. The next thing that they bring up in the documentary is they do, remember Jurassic Park? And they do the first one, the good one, where they do the ground penetrating radar in the dig, where Sam Neill is doing the dig and they're looking for velociraptors.
That's a different version of that technology, though.
Right, older version.
Yeah.
But the more updated version, it's still ground penetrating radar. They find underneath the base, and you got to remember, the official story from the government,
official blueprints show nothing underground.
There's nothing ever constructed underground. That's the official story. They find a lot of really compelling evidence that indeed there are structures underground, large rooms.
Well, even Brian Minnick's video footage shows them going underground under the radar tower,
right,
which the blueprints show nothing there except for support beams. But you see him going down this, square cut, probably like 2 foot thick cement down into this gigantic room underneath. And then he said that when he was down there, you could hear machines still operating on the other side of the wall. And there were areas where it looked like
a vault door.
There's like a vault door handle, but it was locked shut. Areas that looked like they'd been sealed or cemented. In other words, there was something else going on down there, but it was covered up.
Right. And one of the other damning things that he found there, he doesn't have this today, but this guy seems very believable. By the way, if you ever watch his documentary, we'll have it linked.
Brian?
He said that in the documents they found strewn around, they found documents that were reporting food purchases of $80,000 a month during the late 80s, which is a period where this should have been completely shut down.
Just some security personnel.
Receipts for food for people in this allegedly defunct and not used base for $80,000 of food a month for some secret operation allegedly going on underground. Anyway,
again, he lost that paperwork.
Right.
They threw it up when they were running from the security.
Guy seems super believable, though. We'll have him linked in there. The one caveat I want to say about the stuff underground, there is a guy who's interviewed on the news who works there, who used to work there. Old guy, he's got like the little
old guy shirt on.
Old guy polo. He's like a tour guy. But he used to work there, and he said, not even talking about the conspiracy, but he was just describing the batteries, these big guns, right? And he said, yeah, these big guns were put here to defend from the Nazi invasions. And in case they did come in, they had tunnels between underground that would connect these gun batteries so that people could communicate and get easily from battery to battery, just saying it nonchalantly. There's a lot of people who used to work there say, well, yeah, there's stuff underground. The reason, and John, like you mentioned at the beginning of the episode, the reason you might not have detailed and public blueprints is because who knows if they ever want to use them again, or, you know, some things they just want to keep secret for military purposes, which I think is totally possible. I think the damning things, though, are the fact that it seems like something was still running with a lot of personnel underground that we don't know. I mean, I'm not saying that I think personally that it was time travel, child abduction that was going on there, but is it possible that people were being taken for experimentation? Why not? It happened a few years before this in 80 other facilities.
Right.
You know what I mean?
It's a good point, Chris.
That's my thoughts on it.
So that's pretty much what we had time to tell you of the Montauk Project. You guys can get the book. It'll be in the show notes. If you want to read it, it is a trip. There's 2, I think, additional books that Preston wrote after this. We'll have video linked in the show notes of Preston talking himself so you can hear from his own words.
And Al Balick, the guy who we didn't clearly explain who he is. We'll have lectures of him is really interesting. Let him tell you how he's related to the Philadelphia experiment and to the Montauk and to the psychic known as Duncan. In the expansion, we're going to do even more strange things
that come out of Montauk.
And get into maybe some portals to Mars, get into some...
You really want to do the portals to Mars, huh?
I might talk about it a little bit because it's fun and insane. But definitely, we're going to talk about the real L that Jeremy found, reptilian involvement at Montauk, and the general lore of the area and the mystical properties of the land. John,
Sounds exciting.
Any final questions, John? That all makes sense?
It's definitely a lot.
It's a lot
to process. I think it'll be easier for listeners to listen back and have a better.
Yes.
But just sitting here. Usually once the episode's edited and everything's kind of
right, for sure,
a little easier to
and
take
this is a lot to digest. And for those of you who are awesome and here at the premiere on the live YouTube and talking with us, you might want to go back and listen to this one. I'm sure you probably figured that out by now. But it is...
We'll probably clarify some stuff in the expansion too.
And if you are here, YouTube, hit that like button because it really does help us. And there's like a lot of people that watch it and don't hit the like button. So
I'm guilty of that sometimes.
I know, I am too, but do it now.
If you want to know when we go live, hit the notification bell and you'll be notified.
Yes, don't ever miss a live stream or a premiere or an episode drop. Hit the little bell symbol. That'll get you notified on
Ding.
Exactly.
All right. Good job, guys. That was a lot to present.
That was fun.
I hope you guys liked it.
If I never hear the word project again, it'll be too soon.
A lot of projects.
Yeah.
And let us know if you guys want to hear at some point,
don't ask.
Stranger Things watch along. Anyways, we love hearing from you guys. Thank you for being here. I think we have some very special people to thank, don't we?
Yes.
And we want to thank especially those who signed up as Dogman, Whispers, especially, and Black-Eyed Cool Kids.
Yes.
And the one that was the shadow person of interest.
Yes, the one special shadow person of interest who we will read here.
Very special shadow person of interest.
Yes, he is. And before we read them, I just want to say real quick, if you're enjoying our spiffy new logo, thank you to Derek.
Oh, yes. Or D-WREX. Yeah.
But what an awesome upgrade. He did exactly what we were hoping he would do. Just made it artisan, hand done, bringing it to life.
Yeah, if you guys have seen our new vibrant update to our logo, that's the work of Derek. And you can check him out. We'll put links in the show notes. Terrific stuff.
Yeah, you can find his work at D-WREX.com. He does kick-ass posters and graphic design work.
Oh, yeah. Shirt designs, branding, logo, whatever you could want. But he's also the kind of guy that just fits right in the belief hole. Super cool guy.
That's right.
Good friend. Check it out. Links in the show notes. Check out the Instagram.
Do it now.
All right, we got some special people to thank.
We do.
We're going to read some Dogman Whispers today.
And a very special shadow person of interest. Skadoozy!
Skadoozy!
Yeah! What a a man on his own.
What a doozy.
Thank you, Skadoozy.
Thank you for going above and beyond and being a shadow person of interest. We are interested in you, sir. Aiden Menard is here.
Aiden Menard, thank you.
Welcome to be here, sir.
Dogman Whisperer, right?
First Dogman Whisperer, yes.
All right. Welcome in.
Welcome. Flesh Peeler is here.
Ouch.
Flesh peeler, that sounds a little dangerous.
I'm a little scared.
Dangerous man on the prowl.
Welcome in, Flesh Peeler.
Justin Balch.
Justin Balch, thank you very much,
Yes.
buddy. Appreciate that.
Great to have you.
JB in the house.
Kenneth Hunter.
What's up? You bagged yourself a hole.
You hunted a hole.
No.
Welcome,
That
sir.
sounds real weird.
Welcome. Thank you so much, my friend.
Megan Pollock, hello.
Megan Pollock, what's up, girl?
What's up? Welcome in.
Thank you, sweetheart.
Great to see you.
Yes.
Awesome.
Welcome, Sarah Vallejo.
Sarah Vallejo, welcome to the whole
Yes.
Dogman Whisperer.
Yes.
Excellent.
United.
Happy to see you.
All right, looks like Stacy looking on upgraded as well.
Yes.
Stacy,
Climb up the ladder.
We remember you from the past. Thank you for coming back.
Keep dodging those Tommy knockers out there.
Yeah, that's right. She had the stinger.
That was great.
Thanks, Stacy. Hope you're doing well.
Scott Leach, suck our blood, sir. Thank you so much for joining.
Leeching off the hole.
Actually, we're leeching off you because you're here to support us, and we
No.
appreciate it.
Leeching off of us.
Welcome in,
It's
sir.
a fair trade. Good to see you, my friend.
Petra Benson.
All right.
Welcome
Benson.
in. White Wolf Junkie.
Yes, welcome to see you. Welcome to see you. That's a new one.
Welcome to see you.
Our brain is mush by the end of this.
We love you,
We
Petra.
love you, Petra. Thank you.
Yukon Jana.
Yukon Jana.
That's awesome. Are you an adventurer?
Sounds like
I
it.
hope so. It's a sweet name.
Take us on an adventure.
Ancestors were pioneers of the world.
All of the world. Welcome, Yukon
Yes,
Jana.
welcome. Connor Liedtke.
Oh, there's a blast from the past.
Connor, what's up, man? How you doing? We haven't heard from you in a little while.
That's right.
Hope you're well, man.
He's going to be helping us with some things in the hole potentially. So he's a talented fella, and we look forward to hearing more from him. Jen Miller.
All right.
Jen Miller.
Definitely don't kill her.
Okay.
Welcome in.
Jen Miller, we love you. Thank you for
Jen
being
Miller,
here.
what a winner.
Thank
Welcome
you
in.
so much. Tracy Christie Hurt.
Ouch.
She does not hurt me. She makes me
Tracy
smile.
Christie Hurt, you are a special lady, and we thank you for being here.
Keep taming those dogmen.
Welcome in. Welcome in.
Laura Moriarty.
Ooh, is that a villain from Sherlock
Is
Holmes?
it just me, or do people's names get harder to rhyme with each
Moriarty,
episode?
the famous villain. Sherlock Holmes' nemesis.
Well, you can make a reference, but not a rhyme.
That's true.
Moriarty down to party.
Yeah, there you go.
Laura Moriarty down to party.
All right.
Awesome.
Welcome to be here. Jared Ships.
That's easy one.
That was the ship
Thank you for the
sound.
voyage, sir. Welcome into the hole.
Hope you enjoyed our escapades into the Navy.
Morgan Anonymous.
All right. Climbing
Yeah,
up to the
Morgan.
dogman level.
Thank you so much for upgrading, Morgan.
And
Yes.
Thank you for staying anonymous.
Yes.
Morgan Honest, we appreciate you.
Excellent.
Michael Calabrese. I'm pretty sure this is the one we went to high school with.
Really?
Thank you, my friend. I hope so.
Yes.
I always liked him.
It'll be a flashback.
Thank you for climbing up to the dogman tier.
Calabrese is easy. Is not easy.
Is an easy friend.
An easy friend.
Welcome, Michael.
Stephanie Vassar.
Stephanie Vassar.
Doesn't get classier than Stephanie Vassar.
Can't get things past her.
That too.
All right. It took us to the end of the halfway season mark to start rhyming well. Welcome in, Stephanie.
Welcome, Susanna M.
Susanna M.
Susanna M.
Susanna M. Welcome
Susanna
in.
M.
That did kind of leave us with a blank.
Man, it's just so hard. It's just gotten so hard for my brain to even think of this stuff.
Susanna M for mystery.
That's right. Welcome in, Susanna.
Mystery dust in the hole.
Beth Crutchley.
Beth Crutchley.
Beth Crutchley.
Well, thank you for climbing up to the dogman tier. That's a sign too, guys. If you want to climb, if you want to get your name right again, keep climbing that tier.
Yeah, keep climbing
level.
up. Beth Crutchley, she's been around for a while.
Oh, yeah. She's an old school.
She's a good lass.
We appreciate you, Beth, and we love you, and we love all of you.
Yes.
We love all of you for. Oh, sorry. Oh, that's the end. Anyways,
That's the end.
no, seriously,
That's
guys. Everyone that's still here, thank you guys so much for supporting the show. We couldn't do it without you.
Yes.
We literally couldn't. We'd just talk to ourselves by ourselves.
Yeah.
Have a
Yes,
good-
and
I'd probably just stop talking.
no, we would still talk to each other.
Yeah.
We talk to
Just
each
not
other.
on a schedule.
That's the reason. Yeah, exactly. It's the reason we started the show, though, is because we were like, we just talk all the time.
That's right. There's so much to talk about.
Other people should listen. Other people should be mandated.
The beatings will continue until the morale improves.
What is that from?
I don't know. I've heard it many times, though.
Down Periscope with Fraser Crane.
It's some sort of movie.
Kelsey
quote.
Grammer.
Meetings will continue until the morale improves. It's like the opposite of what you need to do.
I do want to say, because we did say we were going to read everybody who signed up at a certain
Yes.
tier, but obviously
Probably should have said at the
we
beginning.
didn't realize how many of you are so awesome, and we just didn't get through all of you. So next time,
They're so
I
angry
don't know.
right
Maybe
now.
we should put that a little further at the beginning.
Maybe we'll drop in a warning or something.
Yeah.
Like, it won't be every, because the Black Eyed Cool Kids, we haven't even got to them yet. We went ahead because we had more to sign up.
We had more than we thought.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we're making progress. Next couple episodes, when we get back, we will be through everyone pretty much, and then it will go at $50 a mention.
I don't know about that.
All right, guys, we love you.
I hope you enjoyed the extra long show before
Yes.
we break, because this one is definitely quite a bit longer than our normal ones.
Yes, and if you want to hear more
so
madness,
hope you enjoy that flesh peeler.
That's right.
Hope we satisfy your demands.
Your demands.
Check out the expansion if you want more madness into the Stranger Things in Montauk.
Yeah, check out the expansion. And
I think the only people left are probably the expansion members at this point.
And people in the chat on YouTube. Hello.
Yeah,
That's
people on
true.
YouTube.
Oh yeah, you guys stick to the very end.
And if you want to see a live stream on YouTube, as we mentioned, join us over the break for members only live stream.
All right, guys.
Enjoy the break.
We will be hunting, well, at least Jeremy and I will be hunting ghosts in Gettysburg. So maybe we'll bring back some evidence of the afterlife for you.
Okay, well that's just it. We're done.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. See you next time.
On?
On?
I'm not doing it this time.
You
I said
have
no.
to.
And it's the last episode of the season, John.
No, half season.
On?
Believable.
Believable. We'll slow yours down. We will.
My pursuit to be the next American Ninja Warrior.